The morning sun filtered through the emerald canopy of the ancient rainforest, casting dappled light on the forest floor like scattered gold coins. Somewhere in the distance, hornbills called to one another with hollow wooden cries that echoed across the valleys. The air hung heavy with moisture, carrying the sweet perfume of orchids and the earthy scent of moss-covered bark. In this verdant world lived Quito, a young macaque whose heart beat with ambition and whose mind raced with dreams. Unlike the other monkeys in his troop, who seemed content to follow ancient pathways through the trees, Quito was consumed by a desire to climb higher, jump farther, and discover paths no macaque had traveled before. "Watch me," he would often call to his fellow young macaques, his voice bright with enthusiasm as he attempted increasingly dangerous leaps between trees. "I'll be the greatest jumper in the entire forest." The elder macaques would shake their heads, muttering warnings about caution and patience. But to Quito, their words sounded like chains attempting to bind his spirit to the ground. He didn't want safety. He wanted glory. On this particular morning, as golden light streamed through the leaves, Quito's eyes were fixed on a challenge that made even his courageous heart flutter with apprehension. Across a wide gap between trees stood a magnificent breadfruit, plump and ripe, hanging from a slender branch. No other macaque had dared to make the jump to claim it. "Impossible," whispered Mara, a female macaque who often followed Quito's adventures with equal measures of admiration and concern. "The distance is too great, Quito. Even you cannot make that jump." Quito felt his fur bristle at the word impossible. That word was an enemy to him, a challenge never to be left unanswered. "Watch me," he said, his voice quieter now, focused. "I'll bring that breadfruit back for all of us." The other young macaques gathered, their eyes wide with anticipation and concern. Quito moved back along his branch, calculating the distance with intense concentration. His muscles tensed, his breathing steadied. In his mind, he had already completed the jump 1,000 times. "Quito, please," Mara tried once more. "No breadfruit is worth your life." But Quito had already launched himself through the air, his body a perfect arc against the blue sky. For a moment, time itself seemed to slow as he soared across the void between trees. His outstretched fingers reached for the distant branch, and in his heart, he felt certain of success. Then came the sickening realization that his calculations had been wrong. The branch was still inches beyond his grasp. Quito's confident smile dissolved into an expression of terror as gravity claimed him. Instead of the triumphant landing he had imagined, he felt only the rush of air as he plummeted toward the forest floor. The fall seemed to last both an instant and an eternity. Branches whipped past him, scratching his fur and skin. He desperately reached out, trying to grab anything to break his fall, but his panic made his movements clumsy and ineffective. When he finally hit the ground, pain shot through his body like lightning. A sharp cry escaped his throat, quickly swallowed by the vastness of the forest. Never before had Quito felt so small, so vulnerable, so utterly alone. Have you ever felt the sting of failure so deeply it seemed to break something inside you? If so, write the word "fallen" in the comments to acknowledge that falling is part of every meaningful journey. The forest floor, a place Quito rarely visited by choice, now became his prison. His right leg throbbed with pain whenever he tried to move it. Worse than the physical agony was the knowledge that his troop would be moving on, following their seasonal migration routes. In the rainforest, to be left behind was to be forgotten. For 3 days, Quito dragged himself from one sheltered spot to another, subsisting on fallen berries, and whatever low-hanging fruits he could reach. Each night brought terrifying sounds: the silent padding of predators, the distant roars that made the darkness feel alive with danger. Fever came, painting his world with delirious colors and strange shadows. On the fourth morning, as he lay shivering beneath a large leaf that provided meager shelter from a gentle rain, Quito heard something approaching. His heart raced with fear. Too weak to climb or run, he pressed himself against the ground, hoping to become invisible. "You have fallen quite far from your path, little one," came a deep, rumbling voice that somehow carried no threat. Quito looked up to see an enormous orangutan standing before him. Unlike the nervous, quick-moving orangutans Quito occasionally glimpsed in the highest canopy, this one moved with deliberate calm. His russet fur was streaked with silver, and his eyes held a depth of understanding that made Quito feel both exposed and strangely safe. I failed," Quito admitted, the words burning his throat. "I tried to jump too far." The orangutan settled his massive form beside Quito with surprising grace. "And now you believe you have reached the end of your journey? My troop has moved on. My leg is broken. I cannot climb. For a macaque, this is the end," Quito said, unable to keep the bitterness from his voice. The ancient orangutan made a sound somewhere between a sigh and a chuckle. "Young jumper, you have not reached an end. You have merely encountered a bend in the river of your life." With gentle hands that belied their strength, the orangutan examined Quito's injured leg. "This will heal, given time and proper care. But first, you must heal the wound that no eye can see." "What wound?" Quito asked, confused. "The wound of believing that an error in calculation makes you a failure as a being," the orangutan replied. "Come, my nest is not far. I will carry you." Before Quito could protest, he found himself cradled against the orangutan's broad chest, being carried deeper into a part of the forest he had never seen. The trees here were older, their trunks wider than any Quito had ever encountered. The very air seemed different, calmer, more purposeful. They arrived at a massive tree whose branches had been woven into a comfortable nest large enough to house several orangutans. With careful movements, the elder placed Quito on a bed of soft leaves. "I am called Rama," the orangutan said as he prepared a paste of leaves and forest herbs. "And you are a macaque who has been given a rare gift." "A gift?" Quito winced as Rama applied the paste to his swollen leg. "What gift comes from failure and pain?" Rama's eyes crinkled at the corners. "The gift of the unexpected path. The gift of meeting what you fear most. Failure, and discovering it, is not your enemy, but your teacher." Over the following days, as Quito's fever subsided and his strength slowly returned, Rama taught him things no macaque had ever learned. While Quito's leg healed, his mind and heart underwent an even more profound transformation. Each morning, Rama would carry Quito to a flat rock beside a small waterfall. There, the ancient orangutan taught Quito to be still, something entirely foreign to a creature whose life had been defined by constant motion. "Close your eyes," Rama instructed. "Feel the mist from the falls on your face. Now, bring your attention to your breath. Just as this waterfall has been flowing for centuries before you arrived and will continue long after you leave, so too does breath flow through you." At first, Quito fidgeted constantly, his mind racing with thoughts of his troop, of the failed jump, of what would become of him. But Rama never scolded or corrected. He simply demonstrated, his own massive form becoming as still as the ancient trees. "When you make a mistake in your jump," Rama explained one morning, "what do? I "I try again, but better," Quito responded. "And what happens before you try again?" Quito thought for a moment. "I think about what went wrong." "Exactly," Rama nodded. "You observe, you learn, you adjust. But in the chaos of your daily life, you give yourself no time to observe the patterns of your inner world. Without that knowledge, you are jumping blind." Day by day, Quito began to understand. The stillness Rama taught wasn't emptiness. It was a space filled with awareness. In that quietude, Quito could feel the subtle shifts in his emotions, the habits of his thoughts, the patterns that had led him to that fateful jump. "Your error was not in attempting the impossible," Rama told him one evening as they shared a meal of forest fruits. "Your error was in jumping from a place of fear." "Fear?" Quito was surprised, but I was excited, confident. Beneath that confidence was a fear of not being seen, of not being extraordinary, Rama said gently. "You jumped not from joy of movement, but from fear of being ordinary. And fear always disturbs the waters of clear seeing." As the weeks passed, Quito's leg grew stronger. He began to practice small climbs under Rama's watchful eye. But these climbs were different. Now, Quito moved with a new awareness, not just of branches and distances, but of his own intentions, his own heart. Rama taught him a simple practice for moments when his old habits of recklessness threatened to return. "Place one hand on your heart," the orangutan demonstrated. "Feel its beat. Then speak these words: 'This moment asks only for my truth, not for my performance.' This will bring you back to what is real." One day, as Quito successfully navigated a challenging climb through a series of thin branches, he realized something had fundamentally changed. He was moving not to prove his worth or to impress, but from a place of harmony with his own nature. The joy he felt was purer, untainted by the desperate need for validation that had driven him before. "You are ready," Rama said that evening. "Tomorrow, we will begin the journey to reunite you with your troop." A sudden anxiety gripped Quito's heart. What if they reject me? What if I can never jump as well as before? What if... Rama placed his enormous hand gently on Quito's head. "There is the fear again, little jumper. Remember what we practiced. One hand on your heart." Quito followed the instruction, feeling the steady rhythm beneath his palm. "This moment asks only for my truth, not for my performance," he whispered. "And what is your truth?" Rama asked. After a moment of stillness, Quito answered, "That I am afraid, but I am also stronger in ways that have nothing to do with jumping. That whether they accept me or not, I have found something valuable that I can share." Rama smiled. "Then you are truly ready." The journey to find Quito's troop took 7 days. They traveled through parts of the forest Quito had never seen. Ancient groves where light filtered through in mystical patterns, valleys where mist clung to the trees like dreams reluctant to fade with morning. During their travels, Rama shared stories of his own failures, moments of pride that had led to pain, errors in judgment that had cost him dearly. But each story ended not with regret, but with the revelation that had come afterward. "The universe," Rama explained as they rested by a stream, "has a peculiar sense of direction. Every fall contains within it an invitation to rise in a new direction. Your error in jumping did not push you downward, though it seemed so at the time. It pushed you inward and, eventually, upward in ways you could not have imagined." On the 7th day, they heard the familiar calls of macaques. Quito's heart leapt in his chest, a mixture of excitement and anxiety making his hands tremble slightly. Following the sounds, they discovered Quito's troop settled in a grove of fruit-laden trees. "I will remain here," Rama said, stopping at the edge of the grove. "This is your journey to complete alone." Quito hesitated, suddenly afraid. "What if I forget what you've taught me? What if I return to my old ways?" "The real question," Rama replied with gentle wisdom, "is not whether you will forget, but whether you will remember to return to these teachings when you do forget. For you will forget, little jumper. That is the nature of the path. But now you know how to find your way back." With a final grateful glance at his teacher, Quito moved forward into the clearing. At first, none of the busy macaques noticed him. Then, a familiar voice called out, "Quito? Quito!" It was Mara, her eyes wide with disbelief. She bounded down from her branch, approaching him cautiously, as if he might be a ghost. "We thought you were dead," she whispered. "After your fall, we searched, but couldn't find you." Other macaques began to gather around, their expressions ranging from shock to joy to suspicion. Among them was Balin, the troop leader, whose stern gaze fell heavily on Quito. "You abandoned the ways of the troop," Balin said, his voice carrying the weight of judgment. "Your recklessness endangered others who tried to search for you." Quito felt his old defensiveness rising. Once, he would have responded with bravado or excuses. Instead, he placed one hand over his heart, feeling its steady beat. "This moment asks only for my truth, not for my performance," he whispered to himself. Then, louder, to Balin and the others, "You are right. My actions came from pride and fear. I am sorry for the worry I caused." The simple honesty of his words created a moment of silence. Balin's stern expression softened slightly, confusion replacing anger. "Where have you been?" asked an elder female. "How did you survive?" "I was found and healed by a teacher," Quito replied. "He taught me that my greatest error wasn't in falling from the branch, but in climbing without awareness of why I climbed." As the days passed, Quito reintegrated into the troop. Some welcomed him warmly, while others remained skeptical. Quito found he could accept both reactions with an equanimity that would have been impossible for him before. He still climbed and jumped. It was, after all, his nature as a macaque. But now he moved differently. Other young macaques began to notice the calm confidence with which he navigated difficult passages, how he seemed to become one with each branch, each leap calculated not for show, but for harmony with the forest itself. One afternoon, Mara found Quito sitting quietly on a branch, his eyes closed, one hand resting lightly on his chest. "What are you doing?" she asked, puzzled by his stillness. Quito opened his eyes and smiled. "I'm listening to the space between my thoughts. Would you like to learn how?" Gradually, Quito became something he had never imagined. Not the most spectacular jumper, but a teacher. Young macaques sought him out, not just to learn techniques for climbing, but to understand his strange, compelling calmness. When they failed or fell, he taught them the wisdom Rama had shared with him. "Place your hand on your heart," he would tell them. "Feel its steady rhythm. Now say, 'This moment asks only for my truth, not for my performance.'" Seasons turned. The troop migrated through their traditional routes. Occasionally, in the distance, Quito would glimpse a large, russet figure watching from the higher canopy, and his heart would fill with gratitude. One day, during a particularly challenging migration across a river valley, the troop encountered an obstacle, a gap too wide for the youngest and oldest members to cross. The other adult macaques chattered anxiously, some suggesting abandoning the weaker members, others arguing for a dangerous detour. Quito stepped forward. "I may know another way," he said quietly. Balin, who had come to respect Quito's transformed wisdom, nodded. "Show us." Quito led them to a different crossing point, one he had observed during his travels with Rama. Here, fallen trees created a natural bridge across the chasm. It wasn't the most direct route, but it was one everyone could navigate safely. As the troop crossed, Balin approached Quito. "How did you know of this path?" "My greatest fall led me to my greatest teacher," Quito replied simply. "He showed me that errors aren't endpoints, they're doorways to unexpected wisdom. Had I made that jump years ago, I would never have discovered this crossing. Sometimes, what looks like failure is actually the universe redirecting us to a better path." That night, as the troop settled into their nests, Quito found himself approached by several of the young macaques. "Tell us again about your fall," one asked, "and the teacher you found." Quito smiled and began to share his story, watching understanding dawn in their eyes, the profound recognition that mistakes were not dead ends, but turning points, that failure was not opposite to success, but part of its very foundation. "Remember," he told them as stars began to appear above the canopy, "every error has a hidden direction, and it almost always points upward. Not in the way you expected, but in a way the universe knew you needed." In the distance, unseen by the others, a large figure watched from a high branch, his ancient eyes gleaming with quiet pride as his student became a teacher, transforming what seemed like an ending into a beginning for generations to come. If this story touched your heart, subscribe to Storybox Sage and share it with someone who might be afraid of making mistakes. Remember, every fall contains within it an invitation to rise in a new direction. Your errors aren't taking you off your path. They're revealing the path you're meant to discover.